you're rearing to go right now.
Yeah, it's warm. I've missed you guys.
Well, once a month is enough for us.
You say that.
I missed you starting yesterday.
You
and
say
then I
that.
Said, luckily, he's coming up tomorrow, so I won't miss you for another 30 or so days.
I had the text messages from you, 2
text
a.m.
message proof, okay.
Like stumbling, bad grammar. It's obvious you've been drinking. Like I get them.
Pictures? I hope not.
Well, not none that I would have ever saved to a Dropbox file for
future use.
Yeah, that's right. Never would do that.
All right. You never know what could happen. Things come up.
Yeah.
Keep a file.
They did.
All right. So, all right, let's talk about the mayor-president's race. Let's start there. Okay?
Yeah.
So yesterday, I lost my cool just a little bit on the air.
Yeah.
And you know what? It wasn't necessarily just for the mayor-president candidates. It was for anyone who's running for local office. There just seems like there's this huge lack of information about. I mean, we hear people come in and say,
right.
"Oh, you know who's running? You know who's running? You know who's running?"
Right.
But we have to verify these sorts of things, and the quick, easy way to verify something is a phone call.
Right.
But if we don't know who you are, we don't know who to call. Next in line, a close second, is an official Facebook page.
Or an official website.
Or a website.
Yeah.
Or even an email.
An email.
Blast.
Yeah. A text. Yo, dog, I'm running.
It's just not happening.
Yeah.
We now have, I believe, okay, so we have Carly and Josh. Carly Omlabar, Josh Guillory. Those are 2 declared.
Correct.
Nancy Marcotte.
Correct.
She's declared. Simone Champagne.
Correct.
She's declared. And I believe that's all that we have officially, right?
It sounds like Paul Eason has backed out. He was announcing like an exploratory committee.
Okay.
And it now looks like the LCAT crew is trying to get him to run against the lady from Broussard.
Are you talking about for a council seat?
For a council seat, yeah.
Right.
For actually a city seat, it's Nanette Cook. So it looks like somebody's trying to get him to run against Nanette. I don't know if that's the case or not, but look, people are hesitant.
You can say all this speculative stuff.
Well, people are hesitant to announce.
I think so too.
So here's what's going on. We had a democratically elected issue to split the councils, right? Elections have consequences. This is the type of stuff that happens. It passes, right? The sour grape side said we found an issue in the ruling. They made up these claims that that you can't adjust the issues in the charter via a vote at the council level, which is not correct. They've done it 17 times already. It's regular things for them. So they turn around and they sue. And then they get Jeff Landry and they get the state to sue as well. The judge just recently tossed out the Secretary of State's position because he was trying to prevent the election from happening, while Keith Kishball's lawsuit is different in that it allows the election to continue, the transition to happen pending the judge's ruling. I'm not an attorney. I have no idea what's going to happen. I have a feeling that judges are very hesitant to overturn a vote.
But it happens. That's why there is an appeals process.
Well, yes, there's an appeals process, but if you can look at situations where they've turned over whole votes, it's the numbers are very few and far between.
Interesting perspective. Yeah.
All that being said,
yeah.
Now you've got, you're either running for 9 seats or you're running for 2 groups of 5. I've seen push cards from people who they were running for one of the 9, who instead of reprinting, they scratched out what they were running for and wrote in.
Just put it in.
And then mailed them out. And I'm like, guys, push cards are cheap. This is not what you do. So you have people who are hesitant, and people who are hesitant to give money. The one thing that's in Keith Kishball's favor is that the longer he can drag this out, the more he can self-finance his campaign. It's going to cost him $15,000 to $20,000 to run his campaign. He can self-finance. So if he can keep people out of the election by continuing to sue the city of Lafayette, this is going to work in his favor.
But it's such an expensive long game because you're not taking into account the legal fees.
Correct.
And there is a group of people that's behind those. Yeah, it's not just him.
They're not hurting for money.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, he's going to have some opposition. He's got signs up all around town saying, I say all around town, it's not a ton of signs, but he's got signs around town saying Kishball for Lafayette, which was a good move to make. My understanding is that if he wins the lawsuit, he wants to run against Kevin Nakan. If he loses the lawsuit, he's going to be running against the owner of Ace Plumbing and potentially a third candidate in that area.
And that's the North Lafayette district.
Karen Crow.
Yeah, that whole area.
That whole area.
Okay.
As far as the council race goes, I'm not a strategist for anybody. I would tell the Republicans in Lafayette that if you ever had a chance of winning, you threw it out a long time ago. When you continually allow more Republicans to get in the race, I
Are you talking about the mayor president's
race? Yeah. So
and some have said it's if as long as they continue to come out, there hasn't been someone else who comes out, and I believe Carly's running unaffiliated, correct?
She is running unaffiliated,
yeah,
right. And so that's something that she's being attacked on already. They're saying that she's a Democrat and blah blah blah,
and that's just the atmosphere we live in right now.
It is, and it's inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said for a long time, party politics has no place in local issues. Being a strict constitutionalist doesn't solve flooding. Okay, so.
But people do turn to it.
100%. This election is going to have a 45% turnout.
May not in the working sense of the word.
Yeah,
but people like who they like.
So I always tell people you should look at what it is that they're trying to get done. I got in trouble. Well, I say I got in trouble. I caught some flack on Facebook for saying that a certain candidate wasn't qualified a month ago on the radio, and apparently there's been some consensus built on that now because as soon as he kind of got out there and started campaigning, we had 2 more Republicans jump in the race.
We're talking about Josh Guillory, of course.
Yeah, and every time another Republican jumps into this race, what it looks like is that they just keep diluting the field for their own side. Carly has done a lot of good outside of this campaign, and if you look at some of the info they're putting out, she's got good info and good plans because this is what she lived in for a very long time, so she understands kind of what needs to get done.
And it's worth saying. You're not neutral. You
no.
There's a
Carly
You're a
sign.
Volunteer. You got a Carly sign.
No, I'm not a volunteer, but there's a Carly sign in my yard.
Okay.
I'm a supporter of hers, but I was a supporter of hers when she was working there.
Do you think issues? Because here's the one thing I keep coming up, and I love to have my ears open because legitimate criticism, and we don't know what else to say, so we're going to call her a leftist criticism. All right.
Of course.
But the one thing that it comes up, and especially with some business owners, has to do with the UDC and her involvement in it.
Yeah.
Is that something you think she is going to address? Do you think she should address?
No.
Some of the problems with it?
No, because look, there are people who are angry at the UDC, and I sympathize with them.
Mm-hmm.
The process to build the UDC was not like a closed door backroom process where we said this is what we're going to shove into the mouths of the city of Lafayette. That's not what happened. It was an inclusive process. And if you look at the successes of it, Broussard is putting together their own UDC right now because they have the same issues. They realize that if they continue to allow developers to just develop all day long and don't do it to a standard, they're going to have the same issues. Lafayette did it. We allow people to develop areas of neighborhoods 100%, and in some situations, roads to substandards, not to our standards. And then they turn around and they give it to the city and they say, you're now responsible for the drainage, the sewage, and the roads. And so if we don't have a system out there that says, hey, you need to reserve X percentage of your land to be able to handle X years of rainfall. Like, currently the standard in place in Lafayette, I think is a 5-year rain.
Mm-hmm.
So every new neighborhood has got a pond, right? And it's been good for them. Youngsville, post the flooding, went to 10 years.
That's what I was going to say, because does it ultimately hurt Lafayette? Because people are not having the same complaints about Youngsville. People are actually flocking to Youngsville.
Yeah, and
they don't have as strict of a UDC.
Oh, that's not correct. They're significantly stricter. In fact, their enforcement of their UDC is significantly stronger.
Well, maybe it comes to how it's enforced then, because the biggest complaints that I hear here is that people call downtown, they call the office, I call LCG, and they get different answers from different people.
Well, because there's a leadership issue.
Okay,
we've had a leadership issue in Lafayette now for a couple of years. Look, if you put up a sign up, a snipe sign, a yard sign, in Youngsville, the city picks it up. They put it by the dumpster at City Hall, and they say, you've got 24 hours or 48 hours to come pick it up if you really want this sign.
So you think that's the biggest difference? In Youngsville, they have a more effective way to enforce it?
No, not only do they have a more effective way to enforce their UDC, they have the highest taxes in the area. But that's the ultimate irony of Simone Champagne coming out and saying there's an anti-tax sentiment when she's the CAO of the area with the highest taxes in the parish. Mm-hmm. Right,
but people continue flocking there. It almost doesn't seem like it's an issue for.
Well, because there's a false narrative that high taxes lead to people leaving a community. That is not the case. It's never been the case. If you look at the places with the most entrepreneurial growth in the United States, they have some of the highest taxes around. California, Silicon Valley, New York City. Those are not cheap places to live, and they're they're not low on taxes. They're very high on taxes.
I would say on this issue, you start to think about everyone who says they want to move to Texas and how we want to stop that move to Texas. I know the effective tax rate everywhere that I lived, and I had a few different places in the Dallas area, was significantly higher in property taxes.
Look at the North Shore of New Orleans. Like all the money left New Orleans post Katrina and moved to the North Shore, and the taxes are through the roof. The property taxes are very high, and they have one of the best school systems around. So there's a false narrative that if we keep tax, we do have a high tax problem here. We have a very high sales tax, and I've been screaming for years. We need to lower that, increase property taxes, and we need to freeze property tax rates for people at the time of purchase of the home.
Do you think that even this issue, as well as kind of like we were just talking about with the UDC, the leadership thing, do you think that if people saw more of how that money was spent and agreed that it was responsible, which a good leader should be able to do, that we would have a different feeling about Texas here? Because we know where the voter base goes when it's a parish-wide vote.
Yeah, I struggle with that concept, and I'll tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
None of it's hidden. There's no hidden money at the council level. There's no hidden money at the parish level. It's all available and out and open to the public. I think the problem that we have is we have a couple bad players in the market who take some of that info and they put it out in a negative light, and they don't tell the whole story about it. I think if you just go sit down with your council person, your school board member, and just say, hey, what is this? Or send an email, 9 times out of 10, they'll tell you, look, I hear all the time that voters are disenfranchised, right? I don't believe in that. I believe voters disenfranchise themselves. Liz made a great point when she was on the phone with you earlier. We have a new era of accountability and communication. Guys are going around with push cards with their cell phone numbers on it. Mm-hmm. They're going around with their emails on it. Hey, call me directly, talk to me, because that's the communication's always been there. Now it's just even easier.
Well, I was going to say, you would have to believe they don't get very many phone calls if they're willing to put their cell phone.
I can tell you, as somebody who's friends with a couple of local politicians, they get emails.
Well, and I was going to say,
and a pile of them.
I have heard, from whether it's school board members or council members, they often get questions just because they are easy to contact.
Oh.
They get questions that are not in their district, but and still pass it on to the right people.
All the time. Look, Jared Bellard is my councilman. Trying to get him to return a phone call is like me trying to get Ali Landry to return my text when I was 18, right? That was never going to happen, and he doesn't return communications. But if I need something done, there's a couple council members who do answer their emails and answer their phone calls, and it's just about the only way to get anything done in my neighborhood.
All right, so the legislative session is wrapping up. It should be done by tomorrow. It's kind of like the last minute, the big major things that are going to happen don't happen necessarily at the beginning, but they don't happen at the end. This is kind of the cleaning up. And one of the biggest things that's going back and forth is sports betting and fantasy sports.
Yes.
And how these things have been intertwined. And I don't think that's how it ever should have started, because you have people who feel a certain way about fantasy sports.
Well, we've already voted on that, right?
Yeah, we've already voted on that one.
Yeah.
And then the expansion of sports gambling, which the casino lobby is all in,
Of course.
and changed it from, I think, what it was originally going to be like around 15 locations to 2,800. Well, of course, that's going to fail. Like, that's going to fail, given what the folks that are against expanded gaming.
Look, we are really good at like it's Chris Farley trying to explain like ruining a sale where he rips the piece of bread apart. Like, this is what the legislature is doing right now with sports gambling, and it's unfortunate.
What are your thoughts on it?
I think the people have spoken, and I think that the legislators need to get it together. Fred Mills at one point described government and politics probably one of the best ways I've ever heard it described. He goes, if you don't understand what politics is, think about it like this. Somebody's sitting at a table and they have a pile of money in front of it, right? And they want to hold on to it. And there's somebody sitting next to the table that wants to grab a piece of that pile of money, right? And that's what politics is. And if you can look at it in that light, you'll understand why things are moving the way that they're doing. Look, the idea that I can't have a fantasy sports league, fantasy football get-together, unless it's in one of the 15 approved places, is one of the most preposterous things I've ever heard. Now, we're hammering on this, but I want to take a second and give credit where credit is due. So I'm extremely proud of the state legislature for getting funding for I-49. They're also having some very good discussions about increasing the accessibility to medical marijuana and the ways that you can take it in.
Fred Mills is also involved in that one as well.
He is.
Outlining specifics. So it's not, one of the biggest fears against that, and then we'll move on, but one of the biggest fears against that is then it becomes a free-for-all where Fred Mills kind of stepped in at the last second and said, actually, here, as someone who knows about pharmacy, and all this, here's how it should work. Which
look, those are fabricated fears as well. There are every other place. There's a ton of places right now where it is a quote unquote free for all, where the recreational is legal. And if you look at the polling in the state of Louisiana, it polls very positively. And I'm disappointed to see that the legislature kind of bent to the will of the prosecutors and the sheriffs in order to keep this stuff illegal. We all get one vote. The prosecutors and sheriffs, when they go to the polls, they get one vote, and that's something that the state legislature needs to think about when they're considering this type of stuff. We should not continue to lock people up for marijuana. Look, say what you want about Illinois, right? Chicago and all that stuff. They just passed they legalized marijuana, and then they said we are going to expunge the records of everybody we've ever prosecuted because they realize that this system,
that's pretty interesting.
This system has not worked. It's been a terrible system, just as banning alcohol didn't work either, right? So, all that being said, I think the state legislature has done a good job. We've gotten teacher pay raises passed through, which has been a good thing. I think the Acadiana delegation is doing a good job. I would like to see them work together more, and I may get a message afterwards from this show saying that they probably do work together all the time. But from an outsider looking in, it doesn't look like they were in unison like they were 6 years ago.
Does it matter to you that, over the past 2 years, okay, if you look back at the session in 2018 and 2017, it seemed like things just stalled out. The work was not happening together. We had multiple fiscal sessions to figure things out.
Yeah.
Now, it worked as it was supposed to, but it's also in an election year.
Well, it's a leadership issue. Again, I would keep going back to that, right? So unfortunately, we've got partisan politics playing a very ugly role in Baton Rouge. Look, the governor just signed the heartbeat bill, right? Which I would go on the record as saying I oppose. I don't think that it's a good thing. All you're doing is removing safe access to abortion. You're not ending abortion. And it's going to get shut down in the courts, and then it's a waste of money because we're going to pay lawyers to defend it, right? That's my personal opinion. And it takes away the rape and incest side of it as well, which is absolutely, in my opinion, immoral. That being said, that's a conservative issue, right? We have a pro-life Democrat in office, and I didn't hear too many Republicans going, "Thank you, Governor," right? Because it's a partisan issue. These guys wanted to fight him hand, tooth, and nail the whole time he's there because they want to beat him. And here we are again. It's an election year.
Yeah.
And you've got two guys running against him who arguably can't beat him.
It is also worth noting, because we've interviewed Ralph Abraham here in the studio probably 2 months ago, I would guess. And one of the biggest things he talked about was the abortion issue. That's off the table now.
Yeah.
You can't even use that,
Yeah.
You can't also treat him like the rest of Democrats and pushing to get rid of Trump. He works with Trump.
Yeah, he's done
our disaster declarations, our disaster requests have always been approved. I mean,
yeah, the undecideds are typically win all these elections, and you have to figure out how you move that, right? And I don't know that you have enough negative stuff that you can hammer him with to do that
other than fiscal issues.
Well, and look, where he lies, right? He's opened his mouth about everything. I'm talking about John Bell Edwards, Ralph Abraham. They're already running attack ads, and they're talking about subsidizing his farm and suing the government because a pipeline ran through it, and all these things which are traditionally Democrat things that they're being able to hang on him. And I don't know anything about Risponi. Hey, look,
it's going to be hard for him. He's a very localized person. I think people know who he is in Baton Rouge.
I literally have not followed this race at all.
232-1542. Good morning. You're on Wingin' It Wednesday. Go ahead with your comment.
Yeah, your comment about the two challenges to John Bell Edwards.
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Looks like Abraham he's polling at 45 and 45, meaning it's a dead heat with 10% undecided in the latest poll that was released, and that was a June 1st and 2nd poll.
So is Abraham or is Risponi polling at 0, or did they just not include him in the poll?
No, when you go head to head.
Yeah, it was just the
Oh,
head-to-head
okay.
poll, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I can send whoever the numbers, but it's out there for public.
We saw that.
already.
So what do you
it's,
think about the strategy for the rest of the year? I mean, obviously the fiscal things. I mean, there are even some hardcore supporters of John Bel Edwards that say, "Hold up, don't say you lowered taxes." You know, I mean, that is the one thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And yeah, go ahead.
Well, what I think is there's going to be some national interest in this because this is going to be the first statewide election before the presidential election in 2020. I think some of the hot button issues right now is going to be, roads. I would think would be one, and infrastructure. But I think this is just going to take a national interest, and I see that everything Ryan is red here in Louisiana. I just don't see how John Bell can win, even with the teacher pay raise. One thing they left off the table is they didn't do anything for private school educators. I know they can't fund it, but
they don't fund it, so they
credits.
Yeah, they could. The state could never get involved in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll make one more comment. Yeah. I mean, I looked at this, from a conservative person that sent their kids to Catholic school, with my values and so forth, and I seen where. And now I'm an Abraham supporter because for the reason that he can win. When he ran the second time for Congress, which is a 2-year term, he got over 200,000 votes in one of 6 districts. Whereas when the governor ran and he won against Bitter, he had, I think it was 660,000 votes. So, with my take on it, the math's going to add up. And I think we'll have a new governor come January.
All right, appreciate the insight.
My final comments.
All right, thanks so much.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting race, and I think that he's probably hit the nail on the head when he talks about the national interest in the race and the money that's going to pour in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all that being said, that's what the RNC and the DNC exist for, and I would now this is not a reflection of John Bel Edwards or anybody else. I think the reason that you see the no party that check on the box increasing at the rate it's the fastest growing party in the United States, right, is because of this kind of stuff. The unfortunate truth for a lot of people is that young people don't vote and old people do, right? And the values between the two and the circumstances that they were raised in are very, very different.
And do you think it's just like a cyclical thing? Because
of course it is.
Like there are times when it's like a roller coaster. There are times when older, younger votes line up and then they drift apart. We're at a period right now where it's pretty separate.
It's extremely cyclical. And if you look at the advancement of the human race over the past 10 years or 20 years versus the 100 years before that, it's been a very fast increase. So there's a very different set of circumstances that people are being raised under. So when people talk about you hear a lot of people talk about who they support as far as party affiliation and that and the other. And a lot of times they go, I don't want a Republican or a Democrat. I want somebody who's liberal on social issues and fiscally conservative.
Yeah. I will say this, and then we're going to take one more call to wrap this one up. The one thing that will change this, I think, for Abraham, and it takes one flight of Air Force One for there to be a Trump appearance standing next to him on stage.
Yeah.
We've seen it worked in other states.
Yeah.
It will likely happen, just given the fact that it is a race that happens really soon before the presidential race. Let's take one more phone call, and then we will take a quick break. Good morning. You're on Wingin' It Wednesday. Go ahead.
Good morning. It's always interesting when Mr. Stafford's on.
That's why we have him.
He says some things that irritate the heck out of me, and then he switches gears and hits something that I kind of, sort of, almost agree with.
And you want to go run and take a shower and say, oh, snap out of it, Well,
I must have been drinking, and I don't remember. But anyway, I think that the thing that Mr. Edwards' biggest issues is going to be fiscal, obviously, because, he's definitely done some things tax-wise that irritated a lot of people, and the way he kind of, he scared them into thinking grandma's going to be on the street because we're not going to be able to fund the nursing homes or whatever. But that's neither here nor there. I think he did hit the nail on the head. Old people vote, and they got long memories. I mean, serious long memories. And young people, They want everything. It appears at election time that they want everything done for them, but they're not willing to invest any equity whatsoever to get out there and actually vote. I defended this country so people could have the right to vote. And when you get a 20% turnout for an election, that just rips my heart out. Tomorrow is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. My father-in-law landed at Normandy, okay? Wow. And that sucker voted. They could have an election for a dog catcher, and he'd vote.
Yep, becomes a personal issue.
That's the way we need to do it.
All right, look, thanks so much for your call and for your service, too. We appreciate that.
Yeah, I would.
Thank you.
A couple of points about that, and I agree. It is frustrating that people don't turn out, but I would also point out, if you look at the average age of people fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's probably 19 or 20. So, they're not staying on the sidelines. And I think that
well, when it comes to voting, it seems like
when it comes to voting, yeah, 100%.
They're not standing on the sidelines of society.
And look,
but
we have a lot of elections in Louisiana, and we've cut it back. We're now down to I think 4, and I think we need to cut it back even more, right? But we also have in the age of technology, we have an antiquated system about how people get to the polls. I think it's silly that we only have 1 day of voting, but we have a week of early voting, but it's only at one location. And look, I understand it gets more expensive. And the other thing, you point out long memories of the older generation. They also remember the dire financial situation that Jindal put us in and that John Bell had to get us out of. And so, look, I like John Bell. I'm probably going to vote for him. I haven't seen anything from Abraham. I just want to say that because I want to be honest about where I stand. But at the same time, like when I look at it from a political perspective about where you're going to hit, I just don't see the big meat there. If he had vetoed the heartbeat bill, they'd have someone to just hammer him
There
on.
are people who are saying the same thing that they said about Clay Higgins when he was up for re-election, and it was he hasn't done enough wrong in the eyes of the average voter.
Exactly.
Now, you and me are looking at things so much closer, and we're looking at every vote. And, of course, the criticism, because you brought up Jindal, the criticism will be that John Bell voted for every Jindal budget.
Yeah, which is
and that will be something that maybe the other ones will run on. Who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
All right, Stafford Barnett with us. There's a big debate that's kind of just started this morning, and it has to do with...
It started this morning, like here?
Not here this morning, but, I'm starting to see traffic about it, okay, and people really discussing this. And it has to do with the sheriff's deputy at the Parkland High School shooting was criminally charged yesterday for not acting. Okay? And, so I think your first emotion, for anyone who is still devastated by what happens, and we're humans. We need a story in our head for why things happen, and it's so easy to put it on this guy who's seen on surveillance video, kind of like, do I go in, do I not? And then he calls for backup, but he doesn't go in, the shooting's still happening. Well, now you have, these legal analysts who are coming out today saying, hold up, you're incentivizing someone to act when they're not sure. And the incentive is that you won't be criminally charged. What are your thoughts on it? Because I didn't even think about this. And you know what? As a consumer, you start to think, oh gosh, he could have stopped things if he went in. But is it worthy of criminal charges, something that he did on duty?
I have.
Or didn't do?
First off, I think we should separate this conversation into like emotional points and logic points.
Let's do it.
So emotionally, I wanted the guy to go in there guns blazing, right? Logically, I don't know how you can compel anybody to run into a situation like that without the proper training. There's I want to say it might be Broward County. I don't remember where it is. But there's a county in Florida where they only hire war veterans, and it's because they've been trained to run towards gunfire. Yep. I don't know that this guy had that training, and I don't know that he didn't provide an invaluable resource by coordinating externally. All that being said, like I have no idea. I don't even like talking about this. I think that that. Unfortunately, I don't know how it works there. I don't know if the prosecutors there are elected or not. I imagine that they are. This may be a political thing. It may not. That I'd be, again, I've said this on the radio before, and I still believe it. I believe that one of the hardest and most underappreciated jobs, two jobs in the United States, are teachers and police officers. Because we ask them to do things that we kind of don't want to do ourselves, or we're not qualified to do ourselves.
Yep.
And we don't pay them enough to do it either. And if I was sitting there, I don't know that I'd be brave enough to run in there towards the gunfire.
And you also, are in a situation right now where you have people who are criminally charged for overstepping their boundaries, excessive use of force, killing a suspect that wasn't armed. So to me, it's almost like you can't have both. It's asking now. There will be some that say no. We should ask the most. They should make the perfect decision every time. But that's why you have civil cases. Civil cases are there's not as much proof needed, and that's also like you're not going to jail for it.
From the technical standpoint, there's a Supreme Court ruling that says anytime an officer feels like their life is in danger, they have the right to use deadly force. And it's interesting. If you ever get the chance to read on it or listen, there's a podcast about Supreme Court rulings called More Perfect, and they touch on this, and it explains it really well because it seems like we have a very bad system, but when you look at the case law and everything else, it kind of makes sense. When you sit back and you go, hey, if they have the right to use deadly force when they feel their life is in danger, do they have the right to abstain from running into a situation when they feel that there's danger? And I guess the only thing I would add to that would be you hear about places where sometimes police officers don't go, or they'll wait for backup before they go into. I don't know that we have anything in Lafayette like that, but I've heard stories.
We hear about that
it.
in New Orleans, actually. Yeah.
Do we compel those officers to go in as well? Do we say, hey, if you're there, you better go in. We don't care if there's a mob or any of that other kind of stuff. Like I don't know how on the logic side we can force him to do that. On the emotional side, there's a lot of dead kids.
Yeah.
And you wish something would have been done earlier.
232-1542. Good morning. You're on Wingin' It Wednesday. Go ahead and weigh in with your thoughts.
What's up, Big Rob?
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. It's Burley.
Hey, Burley. So what do you think about this?
Well, the issue I have is, this guy, is a sheriff's deputy, so he had to have been trained in some capacity, right? He might not have had armed combat or whatever back and forth, but he was trained. He was a deputy, right?
Trained in the sense that he was a deputy. We don't know about active shooter, et cetera. You're right.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so this guy is sitting outside of a school, which is where his job is, a school, right? And he's thinking, I've got to draw my weapon and go into this school. Is he going to shoot a kid that he shouldn't shoot?
Right.
Is he? That's got to have weighed so heavily on this guy, and unfortunately, the idea that they're going to charge this guy, charge him, not reprimand him, not fire him, they're going to charge him. This is just going down the whole. It's ridiculous because you're right. He would have been charged if he'd have gone in there and beat the kid to a pulp, right? That was shooting up the school. He'd have been charged if he'd have.
I don't think he'd have been charged.
In that situation, I don't think a prosecutor would bring that. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, overaction would definitely come with legal penalty.
Bring litigation, and then now underaction brings. It's ridiculous. The guy probably felt like he needed to stay where he was. We all want the hero, but he didn't know he was by himself.
All right. Thanks for the call.
Kids in the school.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
So somebody was nice enough to send me an article that in 2005, the Supreme Court ruled that the police do not have a constitutional duty to protect anyone.
What was that? It's just their job.
Right. So
interesting.
On the logic side, that he was not required to go in, and maybe this is a political deal.
I'll also say this. I am, luckily, thank God, I've never been in a situation that's been like this violent like this. But when you deal with things like, I don't know, being told that a relative has died or you get a cancer diagnosis or you get something like this, sometimes I think your mind works and time just passes by. We saw George W. Bush. Remember when he was told about 9/11 in that classroom?
Oh, God,
and he was panned for it. And then even after he wrote about it and said he didn't nearly think it was that long that he even needed to stand up and leave because it was like, your mind has to fragment everything down and think about what you're going to do,
Yeah, so I've been told that in an active shooter situation, the police are trained to run in and shoot everybody with a gun
But that's
because they
new.
don't know who.
And that's since Columbine.
Correct.
Because they didn't know.
You
You used to have to wait for backup. That was the protocol.
and for concealed carriers, if you decide that this is where you want to defend yourself, which I don't agree with, right? If you can, great. My personal opinion is that if you own a concealed carry license to protect you and your family, and that your first instinct should be to run away. If you decide that this is where you're going to barricade yourself and try to fight an active shooter, and the police come in and see you first, you're getting shot.
Yep, because
right?
you will have a weapon in your hand.
Exactly. So this is such a gray area, and it's I feel like it's kind of a new problem we're having to deal with, and there's not a lot of really good answers.
But he did make a point. Burley did make a point. This was a deputy who was out of school. He was a school resource officer. We live in a time where if that's where you're going to be, you got to be prepared for an active shooter. I mean, more than just a patrol officer who happened to be driving by and saw this going on.
Well, and I think that's a great point as well, and it's one of the reasons I continue to support rebuilding our schools here locally, because they're not set up well for this kind of stuff. I'm fortunate. My kids my daughter goes to Acadiana Renaissance, and if you look at the way that they're designed in Youngsville, it's single point of entry, single exit. You got to be buzzed in. It's much more conscious about security.
Yeah.
Where Alamo, Woodvale, Lafayette High, every school in the area, all you got to do is get access to somebody's backyard and you can hop the fence and you're in.
The other thing, I think about West Side. West Side was rebuilt after the flood. It flooded throughout, but one of the things
Orleans?
they did, no, that's and Scott here.
Okay.
And Scott. One of the things they did when they did the cosmetic renovations, because things had to be replaced and everything else, was they also did a whole new security plan. That school is actually built in a square.
Right.
So all of the wings are connected. So you're only going in through the office.
Right.
If and we've done some things over there. We went and read to a class one day. You only go in that way. And when you're there, you feel totally secure. I mean, of course, you have windows everywhere, but
I'll add this last point. I don't know if people know this, but one of the most senior people in the community of school defense is a teacher at UL. I wish I could remember his name. I'm sorry. If he hears this, I'm sorry I don't know your name. But this guy goes around the country speaking to communities about how to properly defend schools and set it up. And he's the one that went to our sheriff and said the biggest issue they had in Florida when this happened was they didn't have a single point of contact for control. And I'd like to give hats off to the school board for getting the sheriff involved and getting the hierarchy set up. Even though you've got Broussard Police in there, you've got all these different municipalities have them in there, having that leadership and that guidance to have somebody who makes the calls if anything, God forbid, if anything were to happen in our community.
Stafford Barnett, thanks so much. It's a hard topic to talk about. We have kids in school at the same age.
Yeah.
And it is, it took me a couple of times of going to the school, where my daughter goes, and you kind of walk in and you think that's what you, as parents, you think about the worst that could happen. And then you eventually say, okay, we see the protective measures. There's a deputy in front, etc. All you can do is pray it doesn't happen. I mean, really.
It's a very, very tough conversation to have.
All right. Thanks for
Have a
coming
great
in.
week, Lafayette.
Hey, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Come back in a month. Why not?
In a month?
Why not?
It's election time.
All
Listen,
right, 6 weeks.
I said enough today to get enough trouble on Facebook, I'm sure.
All right, good.